In this video, we'll show you how to rebuild the Guardian vent pressure relief valve. Please observe all safety guidelines, use correct tools, and wear the appropriate safety apparel when performing any of these operations. As with any maintenance work, proper safety gear and procedures must be used at all times. A list of hazards may include, but are not limited to, contents under pressure, loaded springs, pinch points, residual product, flammable or toxic liquids, and vapors. The first process in servicing the Guardian vent is disassembly. This is the Guardian vent pressure relief valve, also known as a PRV. The first step for disassembly is to remove the wave ring that holds the shroud in place. The end of the wave ring has a tab to facilitate removal. Use a flathead screwdriver to dislodge the end and continue to walk the wave ring around until it can be removed. Lift off the shroud and set aside. On top of the PRV is the cylinder cap. Remove it by prying under the lip with a small flathead screwdriver. This will expose the retaining O-ring. Remove using the screwdriver, being careful not to damage the O-ring seat. Then, flip the vent over and remove the safety stop screw and washer using a 3/16 Allen key. Flip the vent back over to finish disassembly. This is the disassembly T-wrench, part number 75819ZC. While holding the washer in contact with the nut, insert the T-wrench into the center hole of the PRV and back off the nut toward the handle as needed. Thread the T-wrench clockwise to engage into the stem of the disc and snug to hand tight. It is crucial to ensure the tool engages at least 4 to 5 full turns to facilitate safe disassembly. Now you can lower the nut to make contact with the washer. Use a wrench or vice grips to grip the nut. Hold the T-handle stationary and turn the nut clockwise at least 1 to 3 full turns. This will compress the spring and draw the disc up into the body. The next step will be to mount the PRV in a vise. In order to make sure the vice grips do not interfere with the jaws of the vise, rotate the vice grips to align with the flats on the PRV body as shown. Place and secure the vent and T-wrench in the vise horizontally with the wrench or vice grips pointing upwards. Prior to continuing with disassembly, make sure the area in front of the open end of the valve is clear of all people and objects in case of sudden unloading of the spring. This is the PRV spanner wrench tool, part number 75825EY. Use the spanner wrench to loosen the lower mount section by unthreading in a counterclockwise direction. After loosening, the lower mount section should unthread by hand. If resistance is felt, verify the spring is fully captured by the T-wrench and the disc is not touching the lower mount. This is imperative to ensure the spring does not suddenly unload. Lay the lower section aside and remove the vent body from the vise. Hold the T-wrench stationary and turn the nut counterclockwise to relieve pressure on the spring. Ensure the T-wrench does not turn or unthread from the disc, as this could lead to rapid unloading of the spring. Do not stand over the vent during this step. All spring tension has been removed when the nut turns freely. Unscrew the T-wrench and remove it from the disc, along with the nut and washer. Lift the vent body and spring off the disc. The vent is now disassembled. Use a pick tool to pierce the jacketed coating of the main O-ring seal and pry it out of its groove, taking great care not to scratch or damage the O-ring seat. Use either a flathead screwdriver or a pick tool to carefully dislodge and remove the 2 bearing rings from the main body and discard. We'll now reassemble the Guardian valve, installing new parts where needed. To install new bearing rings, coil each ring, then insert and release it into the bore. Use your fingers to position the bearing. Install the second ring using the same method. Order does not matter. Replace the main O-ring seal with a new O-ring. Clean and inspect the groove for damage prior to install. To ease in the installation, a small amount of silicone lubricant can be applied to the O-ring. Carefully seat one side of the O-ring and work around the perimeter until the O-ring is fully seated. Inspect the seal to make sure there are no kinks, damage, or debris. Set the lower mount section with O-ring installed off to the side. Place the disc face down on a clean protected surface and center the spring on the location groove. Install the main body on top of the spring. Make sure all of the parts are properly aligned. Thread the T-wrench clockwise to engage into the stem of the disc and snug it to hand tight. It is crucial to ensure the tool engages at least 4 to 5 full turns to facilitate safe assembly. Hold the T-wrench stationary and turn the nut clockwise to compress the spring. Ensure T-wrench does not turn or unthread from the disc. Do not stand over the vent during this step. Continue to compress the spring until you can view the bottom of the disc from the side windows of the valve body. The next step will be to mount the PRV in a vise. In order to make sure the vise grips do not interfere with the jaws of the vise, rotate the vise grips to align with the flats on the PRV body as shown. Remember to make sure the area in front of the open end of the valve is clear of all people and objects in case of sudden unloading of the spring. Apply anti-seize to the threads of the lower body and thread it onto the main assembly to hand tightness. Use the spanner wrench to tighten. Remove the assembly from the vise and place it back on the bench. Hold the T-wrench stationary and back the nut off until it spins freely. Then, loosen and remove the T-wrench, nut, and washer. Install a new O-ring into the top of the vent. Make sure it fits snugly into the seat and apply a small amount of silicone lubricant to the O-ring. Next, snap on the top cap. Listen for the click that indicates the cap has seated. Reinstall the vent shroud on top of the PRV. Separate the coils of the wave ring and begin the insertion on one side. Once one side has seated, go to the opposite side and continue to seat the ring. Verify the ring is fully installed in the groove around the entire perimeter. Now invert the valve and install the safety stop screw in one of the two available positions with a 3/16 hex key to secure the lower body in its threaded position. Rebuild is complete, and the pressure relief valve should be tested for correct performance prior to putting back into service.